Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. For this episode, we're going to be talking about demonic possession. What is it? How did it start? And what are some instances of it that have been written down or captured on film? So let's get into it. The first thing we need to do is figure out where demonic possession came from, because it's not something that just showed up one day. It had to have started somewhere. So before there was Hollywood producing scary movies, there were religions coming up with terrifying stories about hell and the devil. And where do these stories come from? Some people will say the Bible, but that's not exactly accurate. The Bible didn't show up first. There was Christianity first. And within Christianity, there is a belief in a supreme being called God. And yes, this God also has levels of authority under him. He has angels, archangels, demons, devils, Lucifer, Beelzebub. All of them were part of the Christian faith, but they weren't written down in a book first. They were believed in first and then written down. This means that if we want to know how far back demonic possession goes, we need to look at how far back the idea of God and the devil go. In today's world, most people believe the devil and God were always enemies, always at war. But this isn't really true. The original concept of the devil wasn't evil, just misunderstood. The word devil actually means accuser or slanderer. Originally, he was a fallen angel who was thrown out of heaven for starting a rebellion against God. In many ways, the devil is similar to Satan, which means adversary. Both of these terms can be used to describe the same thing. In fact, the word Satan is often used interchangeably with devil, but the difference between the two is that Satan is a title that anyone can hold at any given time, while the devil is a specific entity. A better way to explain the difference between the two is that Satan would be like a coach, a trainer, while the devil is the star player. The devil is the best of the best, the top dog. Because of this, when someone is possessed by a demon, it's said that they are possessed by the devil. Now, I've already talked about demonic possession and exorcisms in another video that you can check out after this one, but I think it's important to revisit this topic because it's a legend. Let's talk about the origin story here. Where did the legend begin, and how did it spread? When talking about the devil and his minions, the term possession isn't exclusive to Christianity either. In fact, most religions have some type of possession in their beliefs. For example, in Judaism, the Hebrew Bible mentions a number of demons. One of the more popular ones is Asmodeus, the demon of lust. In Islam, there is the jinn. They're kind of like demons, but they're not the same. Jinn have free will, so they can choose whether or not they want to do good or evil. In some cases, they can even help humans. However, in other religions, there aren't any nice demons. In Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, they're all inherently evil. So let's go back to the beginning of Christianity again, since that's what we're focusing on today. The idea of demonic possession starts here. Back then, mental health issues were viewed very differently. There were no therapists or psychiatrists, so any type of mental illness was viewed through a religious lens. Someone who was depressed was seen as being possessed by a demon. Someone who was hysterical was seen as being possessed by a demon. Someone who was simply sick was also seen as being possessed by a demon. This means that the priest was the person to turn to in all of these situations. That's why early priests were kind of like doctors. They treated everything with prayer, holy water, and blessings. Now, around the year 392 AD, there was a man named Saint Augustine. He was an early Christian theologian who helped develop many of the ideas that are part of Christianity today. He was also the first person to write down the idea of demonic possession. Before him, the idea was that demons could influence your actions, but he was the first to write it down as being able to take over your body completely. His ideas became the foundation of what is now known as the Catholic Church's views on demonic possession. The Latin term for demonic possession is possessio, and the word comes from the Latin word possessus, meaning seized or taken. According to Catholic teaching, a demon takes over a person completely. The person loses control of themselves and becomes a vessel for the demon. These cases of possession are rare, but they do happen. If you're worried about demonic possession, the Catholic Church does have a list of criteria that must be met before a person can be considered possessed. After St. Augustine wrote about demonic possession, the subject stayed fairly quiet until the Middle Ages. During the Middle Ages, demonic possession was everywhere. It was in books, it was in plays, it was even taught in schools. The most famous book on demonic possession was written by a Dominican friar named Albertus Magnus. The book was called De Ministerialis Dei, and it was the definitive guide on how to deal with demonic possession. The book was so popular that it was even used during the Salem witch trials. Another well-known legend of demonic possession during this time period was that of the Loudun demoniacs. It was said that a group of nuns in Loudun, France were possessed by demons. The story was written down by a man named Urbain Grandier, and it's believed that the reason behind the story was because Grandier wanted to cover up his own sexual misconduct. However, the story became so popular that it spread throughout Europe, and it wasn't until years later that people started to realize that it may have not been true. Fast forward to the 18th century, and we have one of the most famous cases of demonic possession ever recorded. It was the case of an Italian woman named Maria Assunta Addolorata. She was a young woman who started acting strange. She would growl, she would bite, and she would even scratch people. After seeing her, a priest immediately thought she was possessed by a demon. An exorcism was performed. And during the exorcism, it was said that the demon inside of her spoke through her and cursed the priest. This led to the priest hitting the woman in the head with a cross, and in that moment, the demon was cast out of her body. Moving forward in time, we now enter the world of books and movies. The idea of demonic possession has been a staple in horror for decades. In fact, some of the most famous horror movies ever made are about demonic possession. The Exorcist is a movie about a girl who is possessed by a demon. The movie was released in 1973, and it was based off of a book of the same name. The book was written by William Peter Blatty, and it was inspired by a real-life case of demonic possession. The movie was so realistic that it scared people all over the world. People were afraid that the movie was based off a real event. And there were even reports of people having nightmares after watching the movie. Another classic movie about demonic possession is The Omen. The movie was released in 1976, and it was about a boy who was the Antichrist. The movie was so scary that it led to a whole series of movies. Another classic is The Exorcism of Emily Rose, starring Jennifer Carpenter. It was released in 2005 and was about a young woman who was possessed by a demon. And of course, we can't talk about demonic possession without mentioning the movie The Devil Inside. Was a surprise box office hit in 2012, grossing over $100 million worldwide. Despite a small production budget of around $1 million, it achieved significant commercial success, making it one of the most profitable films of that year. The movie topped the U.S. box office on its opening weekend with $34.5 million, but the movie was so scary that many people walked out. It was based off a true story, or so they say. So let's finish this video off by talking about real-life accounts of demonic possession. Like I said earlier, the Catholic Church keeps records of all the exorcisms that have happened throughout history, and there have been thousands of cases. In fact, every year there are around 500,000 cases reported around the world. However, the Church only accepts around 10% of them. This means that around 50,000 people are officially exorcised each year. One of the most recent cases happened in 2014. It was the case of a young woman named Emily. She started acting strange, and she even started speaking in different languages. She was taken to the hospital, but the doctors couldn't find anything wrong with her. An exorcism was performed, and it was said that the demon inside of her was able to speak through her. The exorcism took several hours, and in the end, the demon was cast out of her body. So what do you think about demonic possession? Is it real, or is it all fake? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we upload a new video. And as always, thanks for watching.